Hey everyone, this is I think the first stream of January this year, 2024. So I'm very excited. Hello everyone, and I'm trying something new. So I'm streaming on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube at once. Um, so best of all the worlds, and yeah, very excited for this session. We are talking about feature flags in software development. We have some nice people joining us from Flagsmith, Ben, Matt, and Anna. A lot of people in our community are software developers, and feature flags is something that is quote unquote not that mainstream uh, as far as that I've seen, as much as it should be. So hopefully this session would be, educational for you, and also a bit more hands-on as well. So not just about feature flags, but we'll also answer questions like how can you get started with feature flags, maybe right after this session. And Flagsmith is an open source project, so you all can contribute as well. New year, so why not contribute some nice projects? And already close to 100 people joining, so that's good. Mostly from LinkedIn and Twitter, and see some people on YouTube as well. But I'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, you can ask the audience live, or ask the panelists live. And let's kick it off by some introductions. Ben, would you like to go first?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Kunal. Yeah, my name is Ben. I am one of the co-founders and CEO at Flagsmith. I've been developing software for a long time now, over 20 years, and I was running an agency in London, which was the company that Flagsmith grew out of. So yeah, I've been sort of thinking about feature flags, talking about them, developing a platform with them for a few years now. So yeah, hopefully be able to share some of my knowledge with you guys today.
Yeah, I did.
Awesome. Anna, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna. I do marketing at Flagsmith, so I probably won't be too involved in the show here, but I will be here for any questions that anyone has in chat or anything. And yeah, if anyone has any questions afterwards, I'd love to talk more.
Awesome. Matt, you want to go next?
Yeah. Hey, guys. So I'm another one of the co-founders of Flagsmith. I'm the CTO here. So yeah, hopefully I'll be able to provide some answers to any of the kind of deeper technical questions that might crop up a bit later on.
Cool. Thanks for joining, everyone, and believe we can get started. So Ben, would you like to share your screen? You're on mute.
We're not made of money.
Right, sorry. Yeah, let me get my screen sharing. Cool. All right. Can everyone see that? Okay.
Yep.
Great stuff. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, the plan is to go through a little bit of this presentation, talk about feature flags, from the very top, what they are, how you can use them, maybe show you a little bit of Flagsmith, get some ideas around, ways you can integrate them into your code, ways you can start using the sort of pattern. And yeah, and then hopefully have quite a lot of time for questions. Okay, so yeah, Matt's standing in. Kyle, who's one of the other co-founders and loves doing this stuff, has COVID. So thank you, Matt. Okay, so yeah, so Flagsmith is a commercial open source business and project. So you can run vast majority of the platform for free. We're BSD licensed, and we have a lot of people using the platform in a completely free manner. We also sell enterprise version of the platform, which has some things that enterprises like, such as role-based access control and single sign-on with Octo and all that sort of stuff. And we also have a SaaS platform as well, so you can sign up for free if you don't want to host the service yourself. and start using the platform. We've also got SDKs for a whole bunch of different languages, both client side and server side. And yeah, so there's opportunities if you want to contribute on the open source platform, in any of those languages, everything from .NET to Elixir, or if you want to have a look and kick around the code base for the platform itself. Yeah, so we want to talk about feature flags. It's funny actually. So yeah, I mean, we spend all day thinking about them and working on them, but it's always kind of surprising how there's still fairly large sort of sections of the software engineering developer community who either don't use them or don't really know how they work or how they can help. So we'll share this deck. The kind of seminal blog post, in my opinion, was by Flickr, who, those of you not old enough, sort of was a sort of web version of Instagram, I guess, but without the influencers or strange people. So it's like a photo sharing site, and yeah, they wrote this. They wrote this blog post called "Flipping Out," which was kind of like the starting gun for the idea of feature flags. They were a very, very, and probably still are, like very, very heavily trafficked site, and we're starting to do things. That back then, that's 15 years ago. People were starting to do, very, very large number of production releases every day, and this was kind of like where the idea came from. So at its simplest, feature flags allow you to decouple deploying your code from releasing a feature. So normally, if you want to release a feature, or you want to make some change to the way that your application behaves, you need to deploy your code, which is all very well, but there can be, for a bunch of different reasons, why that is difficult or problematic. So what feature flags allow you to do is effectively, this is some code using our SDK. As an example, you can basically use a conditional statement to say, I want to be able to control when this feature is released, and I don't want to have to wait for a deployment for that to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a feature flag in Flagsmith. This is what they look like. At its simplest, there's a Boolean value that's either on or off. And it basically allows us to control whether we show, in this case, the secret button or not. So, generally, if we turn this on, someone loads their application, this is feature enabled method will return true because the button is on, and then we'll show the secret button. So that's what feature flags are at this in the simplest the simplest case. And you can deploy feature flags on both client side applications, so very popular for them to be used in web applications, mobile applications, but you can also run them server side as well. And generally, like flag providers, there's a whole bunch of other projects as well as Flagsmith. They tend to have the way those server side or client side flags and SDKs work. They're slightly different, to sort of handling those slightly different use cases. So just to give you an idea about how you can use feature flags and what they can give you in terms of benefits. Like I said, you can decouple deploy and release. So, if you have a feature that you want to release at a certain point in time, you don't want to be dependent on, the developers deploying the application, or, maybe there's a part of your application that you just want to light up independent of that deployment. That's really their biggest benefit. They allow you to sort of increase your overall development velocity, because you can put code parts of features, maybe some beta features or alpha features that aren't quite ready for production, you can commit that code review it, push it into production, safe in the knowledge that it is behind a flag and it's not going to go live. So, you know, if you've got a large feature that, you know, by itself might be a very, very large pull request, you can break that down and you know, take it in smaller morsels. So you don't have these large pull requests that hanging around for months and months and months and causing all sorts, you know, the sort of classic standard sorts of problems that long-lived pull requests can have. Thirdly, you can segment and target users with features. This is a little bit more of an advanced topic. Basically, you can provide a user context in Flagsmith to the platform, and then we can say something like, you know, I only want people on iPhones to see this feature, or I only want to turn this feature on for users in America, or whatever context data you can provide to the platform. So one of obviously, like a corollary with decoupling deploy and release is very, very easy to roll back a feature if it's causing problems, because you don't have to worry about changing code, doing another deployment and all that sort of stuff. You can just, you know, go into Flagsmith, disable the feature, and you're good. So very easy to do that, but also kind of similar to segmenting, you can say, I want 1% of my user base to have this feature turned on. So if there's a feature that you're not really sure about, maybe it might have some sort of you know, compute, it's going to add a bunch more compute load onto your infrastructure, and you want to see how that's going to, how your infrastructure is going to handle that increased workload. You can roll your feature out to 1% of your users, and then 5% and 10%, and see how that infrastructure handles that increased load. They're great for A/B and multivariate testing. So obviously, if you've got a conditional in there saying, you know, I do want to show this button, or I don't want to show this button, you can then connect up, you know, an analytics platform like Heap or Amplitude or something like that, and say, you know, this user was shown the secret button and this is how it affected their behavior, or, you know, this user wasn't shown that button. So they're very, very good for A/B and multivariate tests. And in larger teams, they can really help as well. This kind of goes back to the tighter pull request loops. You know, if you're having to wait on another team to, you know, there's a service that they're providing that your feature needs and they're not quite ready, you know, without feature flags, you'd maybe think you might have to, you know, hold that pull request or not deploy that code because you've got a dependency, or if you're in an even larger organization with multiple teams and multiple dependencies within teams, that can get really complicated. So with flags, you know, you don't have to worry about that. You can push your code into production, put it behind a flag, and then when every team is ready to release that feature, they can just they can do that remotely. So yeah, Matt, do you want to just have a quick overview of how one of our banking customers uses flags?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ben. Let me review where we're at. So
so they are self-hosting the platform. This is another sort of benefit of being open source, is they can run the platform completely within their own infrastructure. Don't have to worry about data or anything like that. You know, data privacy. They were, you know, they had these problems with multiple teams, you know, having to wait for each other, and all these cross team dependencies causing bottlenecks within their engineering teams. They can release stuff whenever they like, and they can use they actually use Dynatrace very heavily to do things like observe the effects of what happens if you enable or disable a flag. So we've got integrations with a bunch of different sort of application vendors like Dynatrace to allow you to see, okay, is this feature causing an increase in error rates, for example? I've turned it on, all of a sudden my latency has gone up, or the number of errors coming out of this service is going up. So again, that's another benefit of flags is, you can immediately see that if you see that sort of experience, that sort of problem, you can just roll the flag, roll the feature back, and you don't have to worry about, modifying any code or anything like that. Okay, next is, so flags are great, but there are, good reasons why you potentially wouldn't want to use feature flags. So if you've got an unusual legacy software stack, or you're using formal methods, you don't want people to be able to remotely modify the behavior of your application for some reason, then they might not be a good idea. Having too many flags in your application is a bit of an anti-pattern. You generally want to have a reasonably small number of flags within the platform, and this goes on to when you're done with that feature, when your feature's rolled out, you can it's important that you remove the flag from your code, and then remove the flag from Flagsmith, because again, like I said, stale flags are an anti-pattern as well. And then, sometimes you might just have code that's so important that you don't want to have people be able to change the behavior of that part of the application. So, there are good reasons not to use them in certain circumstances as well. So yeah, how would you get started? Figure out what you want to do, what you want to test, what application you're using, and find a small or isolated feature that would be a good candidate for a flag. You can just set up an SDK, set up Flagsmith, do that very, very easily. Have a single flag, a single Boolean, go through the process of deploying your code with the relevant feature wrapped in that flag conditional, and then just deploying it whenever you're ready. There are things that you can want to be careful about in terms of technical debt, flag life cycles, and things like that. There's some documentation that we've written around that topic. And it's also, it's not just an engineering thing. It's a whole team. It's not just an engineering solution. It can really be a solution for your whole team. So, product owners, project managers, infrastructure people. There's benefits that all those different roles can have in terms of being able to remotely, manage application features and application behavior. And so, really making sure that all those, analytics teams, data measurement teams, all those folk can get a benefit from it. So it's important to sort of communicate that with the wider teams that you're working with. Over to Q&A. I can see the chat is pretty busy. So does someone want to take a question?
Yeah, well, thanks for the presentation, Ben, Matt, and Anna. I think we have quite a few questions. I have some compiled over here as well. I think Rugved was asking when you were showing the slides if those are like the 6 different scenarios, but I believe Anna answered that already, that these were just general use cases, but there are a lot more ways by which you can set up feature flags. Someone was asking how we can get around Flagsmith. So it being open source, I've linked the Discord channel, the GitHub, and the homepage in the description, so you can check that out. I have some nice questions over here. So what I want to ask is that, um, you know, someone has to manage feature flags. So how do you make sure it doesn't become a liability? Or maybe you can share some common pitfalls to avoid, um, or any cautionary tales for just for folks to keep it in mind, when they're getting started.
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a number of tools in Flagsmith and in other providers that will help you with that. So you can provide defined owners for flags within the platform. You can tag flags within the platform, and we're close to releasing a sort of a stale flags feature, which will allow you to see flags that you have. That haven't been used, for example, maybe they haven't been evaluated in your code anywhere for a couple of months, or they just were created, I don't know, like a year ago. They haven't been touched in different environments. The state of them hasn't changed, and so they would be good candidates for being removed from your code base. So they can be, you can regard them in a way as technical debt. They do need to be cleared up. There are that we do also have this concept of what we call kind of long-lived flags. There are some flags within the platform that we use ourselves that are going to be there for the duration, the lifetime of the platform. Flagsmith can also, it can store textual values as well as Boolean values against a flag. The majority of the providers out there can do that. So you can store, JSON data or a list of IDs or numeric data within the platform. So, for example, we use Flagsmith to manage our analytics integration snippets in there. So it's easy for us to change those remotely as well. So there's like long-lived flags, and there's nothing wrong with that, in our opinion, that you can use. I can't think, Matt or Anna, if you can share, I can't think of any necessarily cautionary tales. We do have permissioning model in the platform as well, so we can say, I don't want these users to be able to change this flag in production, for example. I only want the project owners to be able to change these certain types of flags in production. So that with power comes responsibility, right? You do need to be aware of that, and they are, in a way, they can be regarded, the code around them can be regarded as technical debt that needs to be cleared up.
Yeah, I think it's important to build those into your software development processes, right? It has to be understood that you are inheriting a certain amount of technical debt, and that needs to be built into the software development process. Yeah, which I guess answers that question that you just highlighted there, Kunal, right? Which is,
yeah,
it is there is a certain level of technical debt that you are assuming by implementing feature flags. There's no real way around that. It is just a case of kind of managing those processes, using the tools available to you to help determine when flags become stale, and having some kind of regular process to clear up stale flags.
Yeah. Also, what Ben mentioned around long-term feature flags, I think that was a good point. Some people are asking some comparison questions, which is, I believe, really good questions because it, shares more about the tool. This is more of a Flagsmith question. So, how does it compare with Open Feature? And there was one around AWS app config.
Yeah, good question. So Open Feature is quite an easy one to answer. Open Feature is an open standard for feature flagging. So we at Flagsmith have developed providers for the Open Feature project. Open Feature is a tool that you would integrate into your own code base, and it's provider agnostic. So it would mean that you integrate your code with open feature. If you decide that you wanted to, for example, change your provider further down the line, then you're not tying yourselves into the provider that you choose on day one. You could choose to use a different provider and you don't have to change your code, only just changing the different provider. There are also other benefits of using open feature, because you have the community of developers that are working with open feature. So they are working on different integrations that kind of plug into the SDK level, where you can add in extra levels of monitoring or telemetry, for example, and kind of start plugging things in to your integrations with feature flagging.
Yeah, in terms of app config, that's a good question. So yeah, it's funny actually. You'll find feature flag providers in a lot of different places. So like, you know, Azure have one, GitLab has one, AWS has one in app config. Those kind of providers, we call them, tend to be slightly simpler than a fully fledged platform like Flagsmith. So you know, you might not have the same capabilities of doing like user targeting and segmentation, streaming flag evaluations to analytics platforms, and things like that. They tend, those things like app config tend to be more developer focused as well, or engineering focused, part of the, you know, engineering team that potentially, you know, product owners might not, you know, they might not have a you know, an AWS account or something like that. So yeah, they tend to be targeted more of an engineering audience. Yeah, just in terms of open feature isn't a provider. So there's no interface to open feature where you can create a flag and toggle a flag. It's a way of wrapping your SDKs so that, like Matt said, you can move providers more easily. And you know, we're trying to define a common standard. I mean, we're involved in the project quite heavily, trying to define like a common interface to flags themselves, in the same way that Open Telemetry is trying to do that for observability. Yeah.
And Flagsmith is open source, so I'm not sure about like the AWS app config, but it might lead to vendor lock-in if you heavily rely on it.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
you know, other AWS services, and then let's say after a few years you're like, okay, I'm migrating to another cloud provider now, so that can also increase some costs. And so maybe just like, you know, think in the long term. And also regarding compatibility, I know app config is designed to work very nicely with the AWS ecosystem, but let's say if you're using a multi-cloud approach or whatever. But yeah, I think Flagsmith being open source, and it's not just about feature flags. I see if there's a big offering by a hyperscaler, there's a nice company that has an open source project that does it better. And I don't think it's I think it's about time that, you know, there is a world outside the, you know, the bigger providers and stuff, and there are options that you can take a look at, because these things can get really expensive at times. And if you're like a small startup who does not have the resources or the team to manage it, then yeah, think about it.
Yeah, so just to add on to that, a lot of the SaaS providers, including ourselves, you know, they charge based on API requests or active users or something like that. So, you know, if you're worried about the costs from that point of view, you know, where Flagsmith is concerned, you can just run the platform yourself, right? Obviously, you take responsibility for making sure that the service is up, but you don't have to worry about, you know, suddenly getting a ton of traffic for whatever reason, and then having a huge bill at the end of the month. Yeah.
And we're getting quite a few questions. Let me just check the time. Oh, we have a little time. Right. Are there any performance hits when using feature flags?
So that's a big question. The answer is yes, there are, but there are a lot of different ways that you can manage those. So, and that answer depends on whether you're using client-side feature flags or server-side feature flags. So just give you an example of how a client-side feature flag kind of life cycle might be in terms of performance. Like generally, if you're running, let's say you've got a React Native application and it's launched for the first time, generally what people do with our SDK is that, the moment the application launches, it will go and make a request out to our API to request the flags for the application, the flag states. All our SDKs allow you to have default flags. So you can say, my list of flags, these are the default values that I want the application to first launch with. Once the request comes back from our API, you can then overwrite those default values with the live values, cache those values, in local storage, for example. And then the next time someone opens the application, use those cache values and refresh them from the API. So, in that sort of model, there's no, well, from a user's point of view, there's no noticeable performance hit at all. The only thing that might happen is the state of a flag or the state of the behavior of the application might change when you're refreshing those flags. But that's kind of something that you can't get around. You kind of have to live with that. On the server side, you can actually evaluate the flags within the server SDKs themselves. So we did a lot of work around that last year. Essentially, the server's SDKs, because they're running in a trusted environment, can be given a different key, which has access to the full metadata. So all the rules about the flags, how you segment users, whether a flag is, only to be shown to 20% of your users. And then when you're asking the SDK, what's the value of this flag for this user, there's no network hit at all. Everything happens locally within the SDK. So you get extremely high performance, fractions of a millisecond in terms of getting your flag values back. So there's different ways of managing them. You can cache flags potentially, a whole bunch of different ways. I'm not sure, Matt, if you've got anything to add to that.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. There's different scenarios for different cases, but yeah, you can definitely reduce the impact of feature flagging, and the net positive to the application is always worth it.
There's a lot of different tools within the SDK and within the platform itself around like default flags. Running offline. We've got customers doing more complex things like grabbing the current flag state when they say build their application bundle and then deploying with that. There's loads and loads of different tooling around making reducing that performance hit.
I think often like the benefits like A/B testing and rollouts these often outweigh the slight performance overhead that might be introduced by the usage of feature flags. Similar question on the screen. Is it possible that the flag themselves add a potential overhead to the application if not implemented properly? Maybe we can share some resources or answer the question like what is like the correct way to implement feature flags?
Yeah, so the way that Flagsmith and the SDKs within Flagsmith work is they like in that example I gave of a React Native application, those flags when they come back, the flag values when they come back from the API are stored in memory, and so there's the overhead of an if statement on a Boolean in terms of like that's your kind of like compute cost of doing them. So it's basically not measurable. If you want to refresh the flags, obviously, that on a client side, that's then going to go out and do a network call, an asynchronous network call. But in terms of like the raw overheads to your performance of your application itself, it's generally not measurable yet.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, everyone. Let's move forward. I'm losing track. Where was I? Let me just scroll down. We answered this one. Right. This one around your company culture. And by the way, if you want to learn more about Flagsmith, and if you want to get involved with Flagsmith, it's open source community. So the Discord link and the GitHub and everything is in the description below. And if you're joining from Twitter or LinkedIn, I've added it in the subtweet as well. So there's a question around how big is the team and about your work culture, and yeah.
Yeah, so
Maybe-
we're growing. We're currently up to 13 full-time employees. We're a completely remote company. So, well, Matt and I, the project started in London, but we've got folk in Korea, America, Germany, India, like all over the world. That's been an interesting experience, going from running a London-based software agency to a remote company. And there's been some like fun challenges along the way. We try and meet up at least once a year. So last year we met in Amsterdam. This year we're going to Cambridge in the UK. Kind of frustrating for me and Matt because Europe's kind of, in the middle of the world, as it were. So it's kind of, otherwise if we were to go and I'd love to have a company offsite in, I don't know, Vietnam or whatever, but it would mean, all the folk in the Americas flying for 24 hours. So, so we get together at least once a year for a week, or, to go through plans for the year, where we're at, all this sort of stuff. The company is growing really well. The SaaS platform, we recently crossed 1 billion API calls a month that we're serving, which is pretty fun. Learning how to build a platform that is every minute of every day serving hundreds and hundreds of requests a second, doing that without downtime, doing that in a low latency environment. So that's been really fun as well. There's been some interesting technical challenges.
Just to add to what Ben said too, we're definitely growing and trying to talk about the way that we're building the company a lot too. So there are quite a few things on our website that talk about like our team culture, the way that we've chosen to build our open source product, decisions that have gone into the fact that we're bootstrapped. There's a lot of that on the website, but we're also always happy to chat about it. So if you've got more questions, just let us know. We'd love to talk.
Amazing. Yeah, it's been amazing doing all these like streams, and I think will you be at KubeCon in Paris?
Possibly. I'm not sure about that actually. Potentially, yeah. We were at the one in Amsterdam last year. That was an interesting experience because that was the moment that Matt and I were there, and we kind of realized that we were speaking to a lot of engineers who they were like, what are feature flags? Because we just get people come to us going, oh, I want a feature flag service, what's yours like? But yeah, we didn't realize how large a subsection of the community kind of either didn't really know why they would want to use them or just didn't know about them at all, right? So that was quite an eye-opening experience. Yeah
Definitely a lot of developers attending KubeCon in the recent past few editions I've seen, and a lot of startups who are doing things for developers. So it's nice to see, and I think I'm excited for the one in Paris. Do they still have bed bugs in Paris?
that's a good question. Yeah,
Bed bugs in Paris update. There are Summer Olympics coming up, so maybe they have fixed it.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. There's another comparison question from Andrew. Hi, Andrew. Flagger.
Oh yeah. Now there's a number of different open source projects that are coming about. I don't know, Matt. I don't know Flagger too well. Do you?
No, I did a quick look into it. And I mean, it's a similar thing, right? It's another open source feature flagging tool, and it's just about kind of what's right for your use case. Like I can see, for example, Flagger only supports a certain number of libraries. Flagsmith does have a few more libraries that we support for different languages. So it's really kind of a case of checking out those products and seeing what the right fit is. So yeah, I don't think there's much to talk about in terms of comparison. I haven't done a full deep dive into the product, but yeah, there's a lot of options now in the open source feature flagging space for sure.
There's another interesting approach, which is kind of more a GitOps style approach, where your flag values are stored in Git, and then potentially dynamically requested from your SDKs or maybe bundled with them. So yeah, there's some interesting projects around that. Like I know like Feature Visor is one that looks quite cool. Been chatting to the guy that's behind that. That in certain, if you've got more of a GitOps workflow, that's an interesting approach too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what Matt mentioned, and others as well. It depends on your use case. If and not if, well, when it's like really mainstream, because like when you mentioned, you met a lot of people who like, I'm not using feature flags. Let's say there comes a time when it's like mainstream and a lot of people are using it. You can only expect more such projects to come, like more open source projects doing the same thing. So if we do like right now for the whole observability space, there are so many projects that do the same thing because observability has really taken off. So I think the more the merrier, because it only promotes more innovation and awareness. And in the end, I think it depends on what your use cases are. So when you're looking in a domain, you have a bunch of projects. I think list down what your requirements are, the business needs and the tech needs, and then figure out which project suits the best. And also, part of the projects being open source is that you can directly talk to the creators and maintainers. I think that's a big plus one. So you can reach out to the project teams like Flagsmith and others and make the decisions based on that. Cool. There's a question, big one. I have a full stack app where my front end app is deployed on some cloud platform and backend is on another platform. How does Flagsmith handle more handy in that case? Is it something like the cloud platform where my app would also need to be deployed to manage various feature flags? Using multi-cloud approach.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go on, Matt.
Okay. Yeah, there's a number of options, right? I mean, it doesn't really matter where your services are deployed. There's always a solution. So, for example, with Flagsmith, you can just deploy our open source version. So, what we would recommend in that case would be obviously deploying the open source version of Flagsmith alongside your backend to minimize the latency between your backend and the feature flagging API. But you could also use our or some kind of SaaS provider, which obviously then is just separate from all of your services. But like the others, we do a lot of work to minimize the latency that you might find from any location wherever your services are located. So we have an edge network that means that the latency from any location around the world should be sub 200 milliseconds for retrieving the flags from our API.
Cool. There's some questions around, can you discuss the role of feature flags in enabling A/B testing and feature rollouts and best practices for doing that?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, gradual feature rollouts, that's with a lot of providers, that's a pretty sort of straightforward feature, right? So we create a segment of, say, just say 2% of our user population, and then put an override on a flag. So turn this flag on for this 2% of the user population. And the way our algorithm works is a random sample of roughly 2% of users will have that flag turned on, and then the other 98% won't. And then you can increase that value over time and roll that feature out gradually over time until you've turned it on for everybody. So with A/B testing, it's kind of similar. Flagsmith allows you to have multiple, what we call multivariate values for a flag. So, in the sort of classic example of, I want to test the color of a button, you can create a feature flag. Let's say you're testing the checkout button color. You would store the cut, say the CSS color of the button in three different colors, right? You might store, so you'd have a flag called checkout button color, 3 values, a control value of say blue, and then a test A value of a variant 1, which would be green, and variant 2, which would be red. And then you can specify the weightings of those flag values for your test. So you might want to make the control value, say half of your user population, or let's say 90% of your user population, and then have 5% of your users get a blue button, and the other 5% get a red button. And then the way Flagsmith manages this is we integrate with the analytics providers, and if someone lands on your site and gets served the red button, Flagsmith would then tell an amplitude, for example, this user session experienced a value of red for this button, and then you can use that to as a cohort definition within amplitude to say, right, this cohort of users that saw the button that was red, what was their checkout percentage compared to the cohort that saw blue and the cohort that saw green. So yeah, as I said, different providers use different approaches for A/B testing. We're looking at working on some of that stuff this year, in terms of maybe bringing that behavior into the Flagsmith platform. But there's some code to write before we do that, because that's one of the other challenges of building a feature flagging tool is you have to deal with sort of web scale traffic loads sometimes.
Yeah. Speaking of which, ideally, let's say if you're tasked with implementing feature flags in let's say there are hundreds of services and it's making it more complex. Let's say each service has its own set of feature flags, and some of these flags, let's say, depends on the states of other flags. So it can get a bit overwhelming, because some folks are asking around how to get started. And if we talk about a more complex real world example, so how would you design a scalable and effective system for managing and evaluating these feature flags, and also ensuring minimum latency and optimal performance across the entire ecosystem? So maybe how Flagsmith can help with this, and also around some strategies to address this complex challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question of finding the right tool for you, really. That might be Flagsmith, it might not, and that's fine. So yeah, it really, some providers are kind of targeted more like hardcore technical audiences. Some are more targeted specifically around like A/B and multivariate testing. So they're more kind of like aimed a little bit more at like product managers and data folk. Yeah, so some are open source, some aren't. Some you can self-host, some you can't. So it just depends on which of those requirements you have and who satisfies those the best, really. Yeah.
Yep. Just a nice question from Eddie. Which is your most popular feature?
Oh, that is a great question. I mean, I don't know, Matt. I can't really. I wouldn't say. I don't know. Sorry, go on.
at its core, it's a fairly simple product, right? Our most popular feature is feature flags, right? Like we have a lot of supplementary features alongside that, but realistically, I'd say probably 70% of our customers are using our platform to toggle features on and off. I would say that like probably the next most popular supplementary feature would either be our segmentation. So for phased rollouts in terms of use cases is certainly one that we see a lot within our customer base. And then once you kind of get into kind of larger teams, then what becomes really important for them is like the permissioning system around flag management, and how you can kind of control your different teams' access to different environments within your feature flagging infrastructure. Yeah, so that would be my answer to the question.
Cool. I believe that answers the question, Eddie, and thanks for joining as well. And when we talk about feature flags, when you're involved in making feature flags, you oftentimes make decisions based on user data and feedback, right? So how can the teams ensure that you are making data-driven decisions and not just relying on intuition, maybe?
Yeah, well, I mean, like data doesn't lie, right? So, although you can interpret it badly. So yeah, I mean, like, actually, one of the things that's great for running tests with feature flags is, like Optimizely made kind of this whole space famous by doing like DOM manipulation in the browser, right? So you could do tests very easily in Optimizely. I know things have changed quite a lot, but people still kind of think about you do visual tests. I don't know, button layouts or styles or colors or call to actions or things like that. Great thing about using a flagging platform to drive an A/B test is that you can test fundamental parts of the platform. So a good example we give is if you have, let's say you're running an e-commerce store and you've got a new search algorithm, you can use feature flags to A/B test the effectiveness of that new search algorithm really easily, right? Just send the user, get the search results from the new search algorithm and not from the old one, which would be basically, would be much harder to do with a front end specific A/B testing tool, or if you've got a completely different onboarding journey for your mobile application, and you want to A/B test that's really easy to do in Flagsmith. But it'd be much harder to do in a kind of like a classic, a classic like optimized use case. So you can test very fundamental things using flags because they're integrated directly into your code base. So anything that you can control within your code base, you can flag and you can test. So that is one of the benefits of using flags to drive your A/B tests. And the other great thing about them is if you're putting features and things behind flags, if your engineering team's doing that as a kind of common practice, it means that you can then A/B test those things very, very cheaply. You don't have to, create a new issue to, we want to run an A/B test on this, and we need to set all this stuff up. And is it going to use the old search engine or the new one, or are we going to use this for user for the other? If the flag's already there, you can do that really, really, really easily, and you don't have to worry and wait, for engineering team cycles to be freed up to test that theory, right?
Yep, thanks for sharing, Ben and others. And since we're talking about software development, security is also a concern. And um, have you seen feature flags impact security, or maybe some of the best practices to ensure that they don't introduce vulnerabilities in the system?
Yeah. So I don't. I mean, that not really. We've had issues around, and we've done a lot of work on the platform around permissioning. So we've had customers who, someone who, enabled a flag in production when it shouldn't have gone live, for example. So things like audit logging, flag history, and things like that we've built into the platform, and permissioning as well. So saying, only users who are a member of this group or who have this role, can even see what the flag states are in production, for example, or they're the only ones that can toggle them. We added change requests a couple of years ago, so kind of a bit like a pull request in GitHub that needs an approval or 2 approvals from people before a flag state changes. That's something that we added to the platform as well. The other thing to talk about with regards to security is, especially on the client side, is flag states are public things, right? We don't, when you set up the SDK, you provide an environment key. We don't regard that key as secret, right? Someone can just open your browser and type Flagsmith get flag values, and they'll get the flag values back, right? In the same way that, your HTML code and your JavaScript code is not secret or private. So you do have to, you do have to work with that in mind. As in, they're public. Yeah. I think Apple leaked some information about an upcoming product in a way like that. But yeah, like, you do have to be aware that there's no security around what are my flags, right? Thanks, Eddie. They're very kind comments.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, everyone. And I believe we're almost about time, closing in on an hour. Yeah, I think as a lot of people were commenting, where was I for the past 2 months? So I was like away literally for 2 months, because I had like my eye surgery. So I was away for that for a month, and then there was Christmas. So I was in India for Diwali and stuff after KubeCon, but back, and we'll do some more nice content, and I have some new plans for the community, and yeah, I'm very excited. Last question which we have by someone is, how do you contribute to the to the broader software development community, and what opportunities exist for developers to get involved with Flagsmith and contribute?
Yeah, we've actually, Matt, do you want to, we've had some instances where we're using like an open source library that has kind of stopped being developed, and we've asked the maintainers of those libraries, like, can we become the maintainer of them, and not heard anything back. So, like, then have to go and like either fork the project or something like that. So yeah, like that's actually been tricky. A few times that's happened. I'm on the governance board at Open Feature, so we spend a fair bit of time working on Open Feature, and sort of like helping with the design direction of that project. But yeah, Matt or Anna, yeah, if you want to talk about how people can get involved in our platform.
Yeah, I mean, we now have I think somewhere around the 30 mark public repositories on GitHub under the Flagsmith organization, and we're always looking for people to contribute to those. So a lot of the traction that we get is in our client repositories. So we have clients in I think 13 or 14 different languages. So often we'll find that even some of our paying customers, right, will contribute to our repositories because they find a bug or they decide that they need some extra functionality, and that's what's really great about the open source community for that. So yeah, there's always opportunities to dive into any of those open source repositories and contribute.
The easiest way to do it is, no, just quick one, is you can start a GitHub repository. I think that's easiest way to support. And yeah, Anna, go for it.
I was going to say, we also have a pretty active Discord community. So if you do want to get involved in open source or with Flagsmith in general, you can jump into the Discord community and ask questions you have. Someone from the team will be able to let you know how to do that, what would be helpful, and answer any questions. So yeah, that's also a good resource.
Awesome. And the Discord link can be found on the website or in the description below. But yeah, this was really fun, really educational. I learned a lot personally as well. Thanks for answering my questions and the audiences as well. And since this is the first live stream of this year, Happy New Year to everyone. And I'm very excited for this year. So yeah, stay tuned and see you in the next one. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.